Hello mathematicians, puzzlers, and other curious people. In this video, we're going to illustrate some algebraic properties by generating equivalent expressions for some expressions that were given using some specific properties that we're told to use. So our first expression that we're going to work with is 3x plus 4, and we're told to generate an equivalent expression using the commutative property of multiplication. So that property means that we're going to flip around something that's being multiplied. And even though it doesn't say here, 3x really means 3 times x, so I can rewrite that as x times 3, and then bring along the plus 4. And that used the commutative property of multiplication. The next property I'm going to use is the associative property of addition on this expression right here. So the associative property means there's going to be a group that's broken up and then a group made out of what remains. So I see that my group 4 plus x here is going to be broken up, and the group I'm going to make from what's left will be this 2 plus 4 here. So I'll still have 2 and 4 and x being added together, but I'll make the 2 plus 4 a group first. Now, I notice that 2 plus 4 can be combined, so I can simply write this as 6 plus x. So if you already had 4 plus x as a formula for something else, and you were adding that to 2, you could simplify that to 6 plus x. This next one asks us to illustrate the distributive property of multiplication across addition. And I call it that specifically because there are pairs of operations that don't distribute in this way. But multiplication across addition does. Some others do too. Feel free to go searching for them. But this is the one I'm going to illustrate here. So the distributive property says that if you need to take 5 times whatever the sum x plus 4 is, we can separately multiply 5 by x and multiply 5 by 4 and add those back together. But I notice that 5 times 4 can be actually performed as an operation, so that would be 20. Bring along the rest, and that gives us an expression that is equivalent to what we started with. The associative property of multiplication for our next one is very similar to the associative property of addition. I see that I'll have a times b as the group that's broken up, and I'll be making the group b times 3. So then I'll have a times b times 3 as my answer. This next one looks very similar to a distributive property problem, and if you're used to just jumping in without reading the directions carefully, that would be a way you could mess up this one. This one specifically says to use the commutative property of addition to generate an equivalent expression. So I'm looking for an addition. I see one right here. The commutative property means I'm going to be flipping around those terms, those addends. So instead of x plus 7, I'll have a 7 plus x, and it'll still be getting multiplied by that 3. So that will be my equivalent expression. Now, last but not least, this problem is asking us to illustrate the distributive property of multiplication across addition, but in reverse. So I notice that both the numbers, the coefficient and the constant term here, are even. So that tells me I could write this as a distributive property problem with a 2 outside the parentheses. Now what's inside the parentheses? So I need a representative for each term. If I put an x, when I distributed that, I would get 2x. Also for the 6, if I put a 3 inside the parentheses, when I distribute the 2 onto the 3, I would get a 6. So that is how we use these properties to generate some equivalent expressions. So there are other ways also to generate equivalent expressions. You can combine these properties in different ways, but these are just some examples. And for now, I'm just going to say calculator.